Hello, this is Diane Bostick, and welcome to my podcast, To Make Change. My guest today is Michael Kennedy. He was born with cerebral palsy at a time when there was literally no public policy enabling funding or accessibility to normal activities, school, work, or lodging for the disabled. He spent his earliest years in and out of institutions, talked down to and punished by staff for speaking out. His words reflected the truth. There were no services and constant humiliation, even danger, living in these places. In his book, My Life in Institutions and My Way Out, Kennedy details his journey from some prison-like state schools to his work with policymakers towards building a real self-advocacy support network. True champion of human rights for all disabled people, he sat in his wheelchair and shared with me his mission and hopes for the future. Thank you, Michael, for joining me today.
You're quite welcome.
And I want to begin by boiling down a little bit of what's in the book. Certainly there's some really horrific things that you went through to rise to the point where you were being an advocate, self-advocacy for people with disabilities.
Yes.
I want to talk about how it was for you to come from a very loving but poor family at that time, and what was the problem with getting in step with education? You were obviously a bright person, always outspoken and wanting to have an education, and those things didn't happen for you automatically.
No.
So
well, it was hard because, first of all, the schools back when I was growing up, accessibility was very hard to come by.
So accessibility would have been appropriate ramps or
right.
Other learning tools that were accommodating?
And other learning tools, too. Because, to be honest with you, I am an auditory learner. You know, like, I usually learn by watching and doing and stuff.
Hands-on.
Right. I had to see it, and I had to have hands-on. If I didn't have it, then it was very hard for me to comprehend that.
So you say you're more auditory in learning than you were visual in learning?
Yes. I was visual in a sense, but I had to see it. I had to have hands-on. I couldn't do it without watching hands-on.
So what you're telling me, Michael, is there was not any way for you to receive your learning in the way that you learn the best.
Well, I was actually, when I went into schools, I was in special ed for a lot of years. It wasn't until my last year of high school that I went into regular classes, but I was in special ed so long that I would have to do 14 years worth of work in 1 year, and I tried it and I couldn't do it because it was.
So basically, there was really too much of a delay. You had no way to work gradually up to something.
Right. Yeah.
And if you had been in sync earlier, and the educational system and the accessibility had been there earlier.
I actually went to Bostick and got my GED that way. But
how did you like Bostick?
I actually liked it, but it took 3 years for me to accomplish it.
So, in other words, the whole universe was kind of stacked against you in terms of learning from the beginning.
Yeah.
And so when you tried to catch up, it was almost non-feasible for you to do so in a short time. And you wanted to have big expectations of yourself. You wanted to catch up to where everybody else was.
I was the one that stopped it because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to catch up that much. So I was the one that stopped it.
So when you stopped your schooling, what happened then? Did you start to pursue jobs?
I actually, yeah, I did that, and I started my advocacy work with an agency that I used to work with up at SU, and it was called the Center on Human Policy. And there is where I got my, advocacy work started.
What I found wonderful in the book was when you made the connection at the Syracuse, I believe, Developmental Center.
Yeah.
And you were able to work with staff then, and because you were able to do that, you began to get policy changes in the future for self-advocacy.
Right, yeah.
This person, what was the name of that person? I can't remember.
There were several people that I became friends with in the Syracuse Developmental Center.
So you think that was a key turner for you?
Yes, because they were willing to, listen to me, and we built up a few people that worked there. We built up a really good relationship.
I think also this was the first time you really had specialized, individual, personalized treatment from the staff for your individual case and the individual cases of the other people.
And I because I lived on one unit in Rome, New York, that had 52 other people on the unit that lived there, and I was the only verbal one.
So Rome is something I want people to read about in your first book, to understand the conditions that existed there.
It was horrendous.
And for you to have survived that and to gotten to where you did, very fortunate that you had the fortitude to land at Syracuse Developmental Center. And from there, you saw that other people could take you seriously, people that could change the way that the system was for people with disabilities.
Actually, Rome right now is a federal prison. I mean, literally is a federal prison now.
Now, you had told me on our phone call that we had that your interest was for people to understand what history was, and that it's very easy for the government or other agencies that could help, or the funding that could go to this cause, to fall back and to go back in time. So I want to ask you, what kind of, after your self-advocacy and your jobs, what kind of meetings did you hold, or events did you host or speak at?
Well, we here locally with the two agencies I work for, one of the biggest things that we always told people is you have to keep funding in for people with disabilities of all types, so that they could be a part of the community as to live in it and to be a part of that.
What do you think is the climate for that continuing of funding for all levels of disabilities at this point?
Well, I want to think that, the funding could stay stable, I want to think that way. I don't want to think any other way, but we still have to speak with legislators and stuff every so often to make sure that they keep the funding source, coming through.
I want to ask, is there someone else that can take over, like the Michael Kennedy of the past that was going out and speaking? Is there someone else in the loop with a disability or a challenge that would go out and speak today?
The Self-Advocacy Association that I used to work for, they still do that to this day, so.
Well, okay, so you see ahead of you not too many more speaking engagements, but is it true that you want to write another book?
I'm thinking about it. I would really like to try to write one again. To have the the legislators and stuff keep the funding available and stuff. Yes, I would like to try to.
Because not to interrupt you, but because this book is almost written in the third person or other people writing about you and your experience.
Right.
Your next book could be words from you directly. Is that what you see?
Well, that's what I'm hoping. Yeah.
That would be the evolution of where you're going next if you have a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you talk now actively to anybody or weekly or monthly, other people in the self-advocacy faction of Syracuse Central New York?
I go on my computer every now and then because they have meetings on like Mondays and Wednesdays.
Right.
And I have a direct link to any time that I want to go on. They said, you're always going to have a direct link because I was one of the 12 founders of the association that I work with. There was 12 of us all together.
That's fantastic. I want to ask you something, Michael. It just came into my mind now. Now that you see that where your life is now and the accessibility that you have together with all the connections that you made, was there a time when you were in the deepest, darkest time of the Rome State School? Did you ever imagine you would have what you probably consider now as your right to live a comfortable, safe existence?
I was scared about that at certain times, because
how did you keep going in the conditions that you lived in? How did you keep going?
I'll be honest with you. Besides I didn't have a lot of friends in Rome. I got a lot of them through here. But you know who really helped me from Rome was my faith. My faith in God itself did that.
How about your family? How was it for them to see you go through these different institutions with?
Well, they didn't like it, but they didn't have any because of the times, there wasn't any funding and stuff at that time.
And of course your family was not rich.
No. And actually they worked constantly. And believe me, they didn't want me to go in the system. But at time they just had a time where they didn't have a choice.
I remember in the book, and this is something that stands out for me, that your family would deliver to you clothing, personal clothing that was for you. Yeah. And then it would be turning around and going out to the general population. Yes, you would never even see it on your back.
And if the staff liked it, they'd take it home for their kids.
And there was no regulation on the staff?
No. There was regulation in Syracuse a little bit, but not in Rome. I was in 3 of them. And Rome, out of the 3 institutions, Rome was the worst.
Did you consider it more or less of a prison when you were there?
And me, yes.
A concentration camp, even, perhaps? Something like that? Something close to that?
It was horrible. That's all I can tell you. It was horrible.
What do you see for the future that's needed for self-advocacy, and where can these policies go so that we can have an inclusive environment for people with all conditions?
Well, I do know this. All the advocacy people that I worked with and I started with, they're still going to be going strong because we have upcoming people that are joining the self-advocacy movement, and they also have...
Are you talking about policymakers or actual constituents?
Constituents, but they are changing. They're working with the policymakers to change things. And slowly it is happening.
Okay, so that would be changing labels, changing policy and rules for the workplace to include accessibility.
We have a saying that one of the agencies that I used to work for, and it says, label jars, not people.
It's a wise statement.
And that quote was started, like, I would say maybe early 70s, and it's still strong today.
Yes.
It's very, it shows, just that statement alone has very strong meaning to this day. And I think it'll go on for generations still.
Yes, there's another phrase, and I can't think about it, is, I am not my condition, I have a condition. Yes. I have a condition. I'm a human being underneath that, yes, and inside of that, with the ability to see and hear and understand and think.
Or
and mobilize.
The other one is, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names can definitely hurt me.
That's right, they do. The verbal things that when you're sitting there and not able to move out of the way are just as strong as arrows or gunshots.
And believe me, I grew up with people saying those things.
Putting you down and then calling you names.
Yep. And I've also known that the people I grew up with disabilities, they told the parents to put them away because they're not going to amount to anything.
I remember in your book the phrase, and I can't remember the exact words, they would tell the parents, you've got 2 other normal children at home. Why don't you just forget about this one and leave him in the institution?
And they did. That's what they said, you know. Right. And sadly enough, back then, they didn't look back. And I think the reason was because there was no other way for families, no other hope for families that the services will be available.
Well, also there wasn't the funding, there wasn't the accessibility, there wasn't the environment for them to say, look, we have an alternative to this.
It all encompassed into one thing, you know, and nowadays there is funding available to do different things, you know, because some of them need minimal funding and some of them need a lot of funding, depending on...
It's on a case by case.
Yep, that's what it is. Case by case.
So very wonderful to have you as an example for somebody that went through what you did at a time of no accessibility and no policies to support your condition and you.
Right. Yeah.
With your very active mind, very vocal approach. And you wrote this, and this results in this book, My Life in Institutions and My Way Out by Michael Kennedy. And I would say that if there's a young person or anyone struggling with a condition or from a poor environment, is there an organization that they could turn to that's a self-advocacy group where they can be in touch with somebody for possible funding?
Well, I would say go to, at least reach out to the Self-Advocacy Association. And in turn, they will teach you how to become an advocate, and they will work with policymakers in you to figure out how to get the funding.
So educating you in how to be a self-advocate with the tools available through policy makers.
Right. And also, I would say get your family involved too, because the more people that you have in your corner, the better.
Especially if they're more mobile and they can be vocal and get out there and really move for you in addition to your own.
And and just come in and have you get out in the community and be a part of, making your voice heard, to let the politicians and the community know that you have a voice, whether it's he or she. Everybody has their own voice.
You certainly have your voice, and it's been heard, and we're very grateful to you for the voice that has been pushing self-advocacy.
I believe that I was supposed to have this voice because not only do I help myself, but I help thousands of other people with disabilities find their voice too.
Maybe that was the mission that you were given.
Yep. And I believe that. I really believe that,
So what I would say is, in closing, that I will have some links on this podcast page for that self-advocacy organization, and that we urge people. I would say that the takeaway for me from this podcast is, whoever you are, if you see a way to talk to policymakers, to go to Northside meetings or your common council meetings or whatever, and reach the policymakers on an issue, don't hesitate.
I've been to those meetings. And I went through my career. I've been to every meeting that I could possibly.
And it makes a difference to be there and to have a voice.
Yes, because if you're not there and they don't hear from you, then
the issue doesn't exist to them.
Yep, and they're just gonna do what they want to do.
Right.
It's just, that's the way it is.
Well, I'm hoping with this podcast, Michael, we've encouraged some people to come forward to push for self-advocacy in a time that funding is being cut back and everything like that.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The biggest issue, because they're trying to cut fundings for certain things, so we need to make sure that the funding is not going to be so cut drastically that people, won't, be able to live their lives the way they should. And with that being said, we want to live our lives just like anybody else, regardless of what your disability is. You should be able to live your life the way you see fit, even if you have to have support. The funding should be there so that they can live their lives the way they want.
Everyone has the right
and
to
actually,
well,
they need to, when they put the money in the budgets, they need to have room to increase the money as the years go by,
rather than reduce or eliminate.
Right.
So certainly you have to have our voice in there to push for more funding.
And believe me, as long as I'm alive, even though I'm retired, I will still do it.
I can tell that. We're very, very happy to have had you here today, Michael. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. This is Diane signing off to Make Change, and our guest has made change.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.